So price elasticity of demand is a really important topic. It often comes up as multiple choice questions, but it's also something that is very relevant for a lot of the essays that you'll write, both at AS and at A2. So it's really important that you understand the topic, you understand the theory, and that you can do the calculations. We're not actually going to look at any calculations today in this slideshow. We're going to look at the theory and we're going to look at the diagrams. So the first thing is the definition. In the exam, it may ask you to explain what price elasticity of demand is. If you give the formula rather than the definition, then you may only get 1 out of the 2 marks. So we've got the definition here: responsiveness of quantity demanded due to a change in price. So what that's saying is, how much does demand change when price changes? So we know that when price goes up, demand goes down, but what it's talking about is how much will it go down by. So will demand go down by a little bit, or will demand go down by a lot? And here's your formula: percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. Now, because we know that as price goes up, quantity demanded goes down, then that means that PED will be negative, because we've got a positive for price, we've got a negative for quantity, or vice versa. So the value for PED is always going to be negative. Right, so what we've got is, here we've got elastic demand, and elastic demand is where the numerical value for PED is greater than 1, and where the percentage change in quantity demanded is greater than the percentage change in price. So what you can see on this diagram here is that you've got a big change in quantity demanded, but a small change in price. And that's what we call elastic demand. We'll later on look at what makes a good have elastic or inelastic demand, but for now we're just looking at how much demand changes when there's a change in price. So a small change in price leads to a big change in demand in this case. That means that consumers are highly responsive to changes in price. So the price goes up, you're going to get a big reaction from consumers. Either price goes up, you're going to get a big reduction in demand, or price goes down, you get a big increase in demand. It works both ways. Inelastic demand is the opposite. So here what we've got is we've got quite a big increase in price, but we've only got a very small decrease in demand. And this time the numerical value for PED is less than 1. The reason we say numerical value is because we've already said that the PED is going to be negative, so we have to ignore that negative number and that negative sign, and the value for PED has got to be less than 1. So if PED is minus 0.5, that would be inelastic. If it's plus 0.5, it'll be inelastic. If PED is minus 5, now you might look at that and think, well, that's less than 1, but we have to ignore the negative sign. We just take the number. So we're saying that that's actually greater than 1, so that would be elastic demand, because the numerical value is greater than 1. So back to inelastic. So inelastic, we've got the big change in price only leads to a small change in quantity demanded. So you've got percentage change in demanded is less than the percentage change in price, and consumers are not very responsive to change in price, i.e. they don't react much when price changes. So think about something like petrol. You put the price up of petrol and consumers still buy the same amount of petrol. Right, so we've got PED greater than 1, we've got PED less than 1. We now need to look at unitary, which is PED equal to 1. So as you could probably guess, this time the percentage change in price is the same as the percentage change in quantity demanded. So in this diagram here, you've got a 10% reduction in price leads to a 10% increase in demand. So your PED is equal to 1, or I suppose technically speaking it should be equal to minus 1. So let's put a negative there, it should be equal to minus 1. And then we've got two opposite extremes. Okay, so we've got perfectly elastic demand. So that's as flat as you can get. So remember, elastic was a fairly flat curve. Perfectly elastic is a horizontal curve, and then we've got perfectly inelastic demand. So these are two extremes which, when you think about what they actually mean, they don't really make a great deal of sense, but we have to look at the two extremes so that we can say what they mean. So perfectly elastic is saying the good is only bought at one price. So here's the price, and if the price goes up, there'll be no demand. If the price goes down, there'll be no demand. And the value for PD is infinity. That is, if you put your numbers into the formula, you'd figure out that it was infinity because you've got no change in price. So you're going to have a number on the top for your percentage change in quantity, but it's going to be 0 on the bottom. So a number divided by 0 is going to give you infinity, or on your calculator, error message. Perfectly inelastic demand, that means that if the quantity is, I think it says Q1 there, then, well, that is the quantity, should I say, and that quantity is demanded whatever the price. So the price could be here, and that's going to be the quantity. The price could go up, and it's still going to be the same quantity. So the amount that we demand is going to be the same whatever the price. And for this one, you'll get a value of PD of being 0, because what we've got this time is we've got no change in quantity demanded, so 0 on the top of the equation, and then you've got a number on the bottom for your percentage change in price. So that would give you 0 divided by a number, which would be 0. This is something that's likely to come up in a multiple choice question. You'd never really write about it in an essay. Right, so now what we're going to look at is what determines whether a good has elastic or inelastic demand. So is the good a necessity or a luxury? So what we have to think about is if the price goes up and the quantity demanded goes down by a lot, that's known as elastic. And if price goes up and quantity demanded hardly changes, then that is inelastic. So we just need to remember that as we're going through these things. So if something is a necessity, then we're going to be buying it regardless of the price. So petrol I mentioned before. So for petrol, if the price goes up, we're still going to buy more or less the same. If the price goes down, we're going to buy more or less the same. So petrol as a necessity is going to have inelastic demand. A luxury, it doesn't have to be highly luxurious, but think about some new shoes. Price goes up, might put you off buying them. Price goes down, it might encourage you to buy them sooner than you would otherwise have done. Proportion of income spent on the good. Well, if you think about something like a biro, costs very little. If the price of a biro goes up by 10%, that's probably like 1 or 2p. You're hardly going to notice it because it's such a small proportion of your income. So therefore, if the price goes up, then you're not really going to change your demand by very much. So the PED is going to be inelastic because it's a small proportion of your income. You're hardly going to notice it. Think about a holiday. Then a holiday takes up a big proportion of your income. So if the price of a holiday goes up by 10%, that's going to be really noticeable. And therefore, you're probably going to cut down your consumption. Number of substitutes. So let's think about something like a Mars bar. Lots of substitutes. The price of a Mars bar goes up, then you can switch to a Twix or a Bounty quite easily. So the price goes up, the quantity demanded is going to go down significantly. Addiction, that came up a bit early, but addiction, if you're addicted to something, price goes up, then people are still going to buy it. So therefore, the demand is inelastic. You're not going to change your demand when the price changes. Brand loyalty, Apple, Nike. Price goes up, people still buy the iPhone, don't they? So if you've got brand loyalty, then our demand is not going to be affected that much by price. And time period. Well, the longer you have to adjust, then the more elastic something's going to become. So for example, If petrol goes up in price, initially you're going to carry on buying the petrol, but maybe in the longer term, you might switch to an electric car. So in the long term, demand is going to be more inelastic. So we didn't write anything for the second one. So small proportion of income is inelastic. Now what you'll find is that you could take an item and you could think some of these points suggest that that item has elastic demand. Some of these things suggest that the item has inelastic demand. So for example, you might take something like, I don't know, a can of Coke. Oops. So a can of Coke, you say it's necessity or luxury. Probably luxury, so elastic. Proportion of income spent on the good, small, so inelastic. Number of substitutes, lots, so elastic. Addiction, probably some people are addicted, so that makes that inelastic. Brand loyalty, again, some people are loyal, so that makes it inelastic. And time period, so that's, well, it doesn't take long to switch from Coke to Pepsi or Dr. Pepper, so in this case time period is probably irrelevant.